went to the wrap party, that this was it for the Andy Griffith Show.
Henry Winkler breaks his silence on Ron Howard after 40 years.
I had Ron Howard.
They say there are only 7 stories. I think there might only be one story.
Who is my brother today, who I love with every fiber of my being.
Ron Howard was a famous red-headed boy who acted on a TV show called The Andy Griffith Show. Many people loved watching the show because it was about a nice small town called Mayberry. On TV, everyone seemed happy and got along well. But what happened behind the cameras when they weren't filming was very different from what people saw on their TV screens. There were secret fights, hurt feelings, and people who pretended to be nice but were actually very mean. The Andy Griffith Show started on October 3rd, 1960, and ended on April 1st, 1968. It ran for 8 long years and had 249 episodes. Some episodes were in black and white, and some were in color. The show was about a sheriff named Andy Taylor who lived with his young son Opie and his Aunt Bee in a small town called Mayberry in North Carolina. Ron Howard played Opie, the little boy with freckles and red hair. The show was incredibly popular. Every week, millions of families would sit together in their living rooms to watch what was happening in Mayberry. People loved it because it showed a simple, peaceful town where everyone was kind to each other. The sheriff never had to use his gun. And the biggest problems were usually silly things like someone's chickens getting loose or neighbors arguing about who had the best pie recipe. It made people feel good and reminded them of simpler times. But making the TV show wasn't always peaceful like the town they were pretending to live in. Some of the actors didn't get along with each other. When the cameras stopped rolling, they had to smile and act like a happy family on TV. But in real life, some of them couldn't stand each other. There was one person on the show that Ron Howard really didn't like working with, and this same person also made Andy Griffith very upset. Their fight lasted for many years, and it was kept secret from the fans who loved the show. Ron Howard was born on March 1st, 1954, in a place called Duncan, Oklahoma. His parents were both actors, so he grew up around TV shows and movies. His father's name was Rance Howard, and his mother was Jean Spiegel Howard. Because both his parents worked in show business, Ron learned. Ron learned about acting from the time he was a tiny baby. His house was always full of scripts, costumes, and talk about different TV shows and movies. When Ron was just 5 years old, he started acting in different TV shows. He was in shows like The Twilight Zone, which was a scary show for grown-ups, and Dennis the Menace, which was about a naughty little boy. But his biggest and most important role came when he was only 6 years old. He got the job playing Opie on The Andy Griffith Show, and this changed his whole life. Opie was a sweet, innocent little boy who lived with his dad, the sheriff, and his Aunt Bee. The sheriff was a widower, which means his wife had died, so he was raising Opie all by himself with help from Aunt Bee. Aunt Bee was supposed to be like a mother to Opie. She took care of him, cooked meals for the family, helped him with his homework, and tucked him into bed at night. She was supposed to be loving, warm, and kind just like a real aunt would be. But the actress who played Aunt Bee was very different from her character. Her real name was Frances Bavier, and she was nothing like the sweet, caring woman people saw on TV. While Aunt Bee was warm and friendly on the show, Frances was cold, unfriendly, and sometimes even mean in real life. She didn't like talking to the other actors when they weren't filming. She kept to herself and acted like she was too good to be friends with anyone. Frances was very strict and demanding about how everything should be done on the set. If the director asked her to move just a little bit to the left or right for the camera, she would get angry and argue about it. If someone suggested a small change to how she said her lines, she would get upset and refuse to do it. She made everyone around her feel nervous and uncomfortable because they never knew what would make her mad. Ron Howard was just a little kid when all this was happening. But even at 6 years old, he could tell that Frances Bavier didn't like him very much. She never treated him nicely like the other grown-ups on the show did. She didn't give him hugs or tell him. He did a good job like a real aunt would do. She was cold and distant, and she made Ron feel like he was bothering her just by being there. This was really hard for Ron, because he was so young. Imagine being 6 years old and having to work with a grown-up who was mean to you every day. Ron had to pretend to love Aunt Bee on the show, but in real life, he dreaded having scenes with Frances. He felt scared and uncomfortable around her, but he was too young to understand why she was so mean to him. Andy Griffith, who played the sheriff and was the main star of the show, also had big problems with Frances Bavier. Andy was a nice, friendly man who liked to joke around and have fun with everyone on the set. He tried to be kind to Frances and include her in conversations, but she didn't want to be friends with anyone. She thought she was a serious, important actress who was too good to be friendly with her coworkers. The fighting between Andy and Frances got worse and worse as the years went by. They had to work together every single day, pretending to be a happy family on TV. But behind the scenes, they could barely stand to be in the same room together. Frances thought Andy wasn't serious enough about acting, and Andy thought Frances was snobbish and rude. Other people who worked on the show noticed the tension, too. Howard Morris, who played a character called Ernest T. Basin, also directed some episodes, said that working with Frances was like walking through a minefield. You never knew when she might explode with anger over something small. Everyone had to be very careful about what they said and did around her. The situation was so bad that even after the show ended in 1968, Andy and Frances still didn't talk to each other. They had worked together for 8 years, but they never became friends. Andy tried once to make things better between them. He went to Frances's house to visit her and try to work things out, but she got very angry that he came to see her without calling first. She was very private and didn't like surprise visitors. This made their relationship even worse than before. For more than 20 years, Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier didn't speak to each other. They both went on to do other things after the Andy Griffith show ended, but they never forgot about their fight. It was like a dark cloud that followed both of them for decades. But then, many years later, something changed. Frances Bavier had gotten very old and very sick. She was battling cancer, which is a serious disease that can kill people. When people know they might die soon, they sometimes think about all the things they wish they had done differently in their lives. Frances started thinking about how mean she'd been to Andy and the other people on the show. One day, when Frances was very sick, she picked up a phone and called Andy Griffith. She told him she was sorry for being so mean and difficult to work with all those years. She said it was her fault that they didn't get along, and she wished she had been nicer to everyone. Andy was surprised to hear from her, but he was glad she called. He forgave her, and they were finally able to talk to each other like friends before she died. Frances Bavier died in 1989 when she was 86 years old. Even though she had been born in New York City, she spent her last years living in North Carolina, the same state where the fictional town of Mayberry was supposed to be. She had retired from acting in 1972 and lived quietly in a small town called Siler City. The people who lived there said she was private but kind, very different from how she had acted in Hollywood. After the Andy Griffith show ended, Ron Howard kept acting. He got another famous role on a TV show called Happy Days, where he played a teenager named Richie Cunningham. Happy Days was about a family living in the 1950s, and it was very popular with people of all ages. Ron worked on Happy Days for several years, but he had bigger dreams than just being an actor. Ron didn't want to just be an actor forever. He wanted to learn how to make movies and be the person who tells everyone else what to do, called a director. Directors are like the boss of a movie. They decide how the story should be told, how the actors should say their lines, and how everything should look on screen. When Ron was 23 years old, he made his first movie as a director. It was called Grand Theft Auto, and was about car chases and action. Now, he is the person who builds a movie that his dad built and is the supervisor in charge of it. When Ron was 23 years old, he wanted to call it the boss of a movie. They decide how the story should be told, how the actors should say their lines, and how it was all going to be done. The movie wasn't very good, and not many people want to see it. But it was Ron's first try at being a director. He learned a lot from making this movie. Even though it wasn't successful, Ron didn't give up. He kept making more movies, and he got better and better at directing with each one. He made a movie called Night Shift in 1982, which was a comedy about people who work at night. Then in 1984, he made a movie called Splash, which was about a man who falls in love with a mermaid. This movie was very popular, and it made a lot of money. People started to notice that Ron Howard was becoming a really good director. Ron's biggest success as a director came in 2001 when he made a movie called A Beautiful Mind. This movie was about a real person named John Nash, who was a very smart mathematician, but also had a mental illness called schizophrenia. The illness made him see and hear things that weren't really there, which made his life very difficult. But he was still able to do amazing work in mathematics, and even won a Nobel Prize. A Beautiful Mind starred Russell Crowe as John Nash and Jennifer Connelly as his wife. The movie showed how hard it was for John to live with his illness, but also how much his wife loved him and helped him through the difficult times. It was a very emotional movie that made many people cry. The movie was incredibly successful. It won 4 Academy Awards, which are the biggest prizes movies can win. Ron Howard won the Oscar for Best Director, and the movie won Best Picture, which means it was chosen as the best movie of the year. Jennifer Connelly won Best Supporting Actress for playing John Nash's wife. But not everyone was happy with A Beautiful Mind. Some people said Ron didn't tell the whole truth about John Nash's life. They said he left out important parts of the story to make the movie nicer and more pleasant than real life actually was. For example, John Nash had a son with another woman before he got married, but this wasn't shown in the movie. Some people also said the movie didn't show how difficult John Nash could be to deal with in real life. Ron Howard said he made these changes because he wanted to focus on the love story between John Nash and his wife. He wanted to show how love can help people overcome even the most difficult challenges. But some people thought it was wrong to change the true story so much. They said people should know the real truth about John Nash, not just the pretty version that Ron created for the movie. This criticism hurt Ron's feelings. But what bothered him most was that some people started being mean to the real John Nash because of the movie. They would ask him personal questions about his life or criticize him for things that weren't even his fault. Ron felt bad that his movie had caused problems for the real person it was supposed to honor. Ron Howard also got married when he was young, and his love story is very different from the drama that happened on the Andy Griffith Show. He met a girl named Cheryl Ally when they were both just 16 years old, which is about how old you are when you're a sophomore in high school. They met in California, where Ron was still working as an actor. Ron and Cheryl liked each other right away, but their relationship grew slowly. They would go on dates to the movies and out for pizza just like regular teenagers. Ron drove a mint green Volkswagen Beetle, which was a small round car that was very popular in the 1970s. Even though Ron was famous from being on TV, Cheryl treated him like a normal person, which he really appreciated. Ron knew pretty quickly that he wanted to marry Cheryl, but she wasn't ready to get married right away. She was smart and independent, and she wanted to finish school and figure out what she wanted to do with her own life before she got married. Ron asked her to marry him 3 different times before she finally said yes. They got married on June 7, 1975, when Ron was 21 years old and Cheryl was 20. And Cheryl had a marriage and discussions with him before she was ready to marry as well. Their wedding was in Burbank, California, and some of Ron's co-stars from Happy Days came to celebrate with them. It was a simple, nice wedding with family and friends. Ron and Cheryl have now been married for 50 years, which is incredibly unusual in Hollywood. Most actors and actresses get divorced after just a few years of marriage, but Ron and Cheryl have stayed together through everything. On the flip side, Martha Mason has won 2 Emmys, including Best Actress and Best Presenter. They have 4 children together. Twin daughters named Jocelyn and Paige, another daughter named Bryce, and a son named Reed. All of their children have worked in movies and TV shows just like their parents. Ron says the secret to staying married for so long is that he and Cheryl always talk to each other about everything. They don't keep secrets from each other, and they always try to solve problems together instead of fighting about them. They also both keep changing and growing as people, which keeps their relationship interesting and fresh. For their 50th wedding anniversary, Ron surprised Cheryl by taking her for a drive in the same mint green Volkswagen Beetle he had when they first met. He had kept the car all these years, and it still runs perfectly. They drove around and remembered all the fun times they had when they were young and just starting to fall in love. Even though Ron Howard is now a very successful movie director who has won many awards, he still remembers what it was like to be a little kid working with mean adults like Francis Bavier. These early experiences taught him important lessons about how to treat people, especially when he became a director and had to work with actors of all ages. When Ron directs movies now, he always tries to be kind and patient with. Ask ChatGPT. Everyone, especially young actors. He remembers how scary it was to work with Francis Bavier when he was little, and he never wants any child to feel that way on one of his movie sets. He makes sure that everyone feels welcome and respected, no matter how old they are or how famous they are. Ron has also learned to be careful about trusting people who seem nice on the surface, but might be different underneath. Recently, he worked on a movie about a man named J.D. Vance, who wrote a book about growing up poor in Ohio. At the time, J.D. Vance seemed like a nice person with an interesting and inspiring story about overcoming difficulties. But later, J.D. Vance became a politician and started saying things that Ron Howard didn't agree with. This reminded Ron of how Frances Bavier seemed sweet and loving when she played Ambie on TV, but was actually mean and difficult in real life. It made Ron realize that sometimes people aren't who they pretend to be, and you have to be careful about trusting them completely. Today, Ron Howard is one of the most respected movie directors in Hollywood. He has made movies that have earned hundreds of millions of dollars and won many awards. People trust him to make good movies because he works hard, treats everyone fairly, and always tries to tell interesting stories that make people think and feel. The Andy Griffith Show is still popular today, even though it ended more than 50 years ago. People still watch it on TV because they like the idea of living in a small town where everyone knows each other and helps each other. But Ron Howard knows that real life isn't always as nice and simple as what we see on TV. Sometimes people who seem nice are actually mean, and sometimes the best relationships take a lot of work to keep strong. Ron's story teaches us several important lessons. First, even when bad things happen to us when we're young, like having to work with mean people, we can still grow up to do great things. Ron didn't let Frances Bavier's meanness stop him from becoming successful. Instead, he used what he learned to become a better person and a better director. Second, Ron's story shows us how important it is to be kind to everyone, especially children. Frances Bavier probably didn't realize how much her meanness affected young Ron Howard, but he remembered it for the rest of his life. Now, as a successful director, Ron always makes sure to treat young actors with kindness and respect. Finally, Ron's long, happy marriage to Cheryl shows us that true love really can last forever if both people work at it. In a world where many relationships end quickly, Ron and Cheryl prove that it's possible to stay in love and stay married for a whole lifetime if you're willing to be patient, kind, and honest with each other. Ask ChatGPT.